put your hands together for Sonia Faleiro.
I should point out that that was not a quote from my own life. It was from Beautiful Thing.
Yes.
It's just such an honor to be here this evening. And I'm so very pleased to be able to join you for the Asha for Women 2010 Gala, Hope Through Empowerment. As a journalist and author, I've had the honor of meeting many inspirational women. Often what made these women inspirational wasn't what they did. It was what they didn't do when they found themselves at the receiving end of abuse. They were confused, they were shocked, some were temporarily broken. But what these women didn't do was allow circumstances to defeat them. Many of the women made it out of situations of abuse because of small non-profits like Asha. They found out about volunteer activists through word of mouth or online, and that discovery and the subsequent sense of security and hope that they found through their often clandestine interactions with the activists empowered them to remove themselves and their children from out of a prison of abuse and towards a sanctuary. Tonight I'd like to share with you a few stories that inspired me. These stories aren't confined to one place or a particular class of people. And that's because, as we all know, abuse affects women of every class and citizenship everywhere. Let me start in a place that not many of you may be familiar with. It's a place called Vidarbha. It's an agrarian district in Maharashtra, India, where several years ago, farmers were committing suicides in droves because they could no longer bear the burden of debt. At the time I went to Vidarbha, one farmer was killing himself, or rather a farmer was killing himself every 12 hours. The media had initially ignored the story, and later, when the rate of suicide became a phenomenon of sorts, wrote exclusively about the men. But when I went to Vidarbha, I discovered a different, arguably even more heartbreaking aspect of the story. I found that when a farmer killed himself, he almost always left behind a wife and children, and his debt became theirs to carry. Because everyone in Vidarbha is poor, even those family members who wanted to help could not afford to. One of the widows I met with was Nalini Kalaskar. She was only 21 years old. She had a 5-year-old son. When her husband was alive, her life was hell. He got drunk and beat her every single night. But when he died, her hell became incredibly more hellish. Her in-laws threw her out of the family so they wouldn't have to give her a share of the government compensation they had received as a result of their son, her husband's, suicide. Forced to return home to her parents, she discovered they weren't keen to have her either. So what did Nalini do? She did what you may not imagine a woman who is poor and illiterate, who has never worked outside the house, and who in fact kept her face covered in the presence of men, would have the courage to do. With the help of a small, local non-profit that works specifically with women like her, Nalini Kalaskar, aged 21, became a farmer. And with just a little bit of help, kind words, a practical plan, and some money, she harnessed her determination to change her destiny. As a result, she went from being seen as a victim to someone who was admired as an example. Let's move a little closer home and let me tell you about a young woman who fell in love with a man she met over the internet. Sunita lived in India. The man in question lived here in the United States. They corresponded over email and chat for several months, but soon enough they had to make a decision about their future. If they hadn't, Sunita's parents would have married her off to someone else. So they decided to get married, and 2 days after they became man and wife, they left India for the States. Imagine how this young woman, full of plans and dreams for the future, felt the night her new husband, after an argument she thought of as fairly inconsequential, leaned over the kitchen table and punched her. He then threw her out of the house and locked the door behind her. What could she do? She could call the cops, but she had no phone and no money. She could ask a neighbor to call the cops for her, but she lived in a suburb of thick walls and high fences. She hadn't even seen her neighbors. She was new to the country and didn't speak very good English. What if she made a bad situation worse? So Sunita waited outside her house all night, and the next morning, when her husband opened the door and begged her forgiveness, she ran past him into her bedroom, grabbed her bag, ran back outside, and kept running all the way down the street until she found a cab. She directed the cab into town, made inquiries, and found a non-profit that would see her right away. With their support, she came to a decision. It's been 10 years, and Sunita is now remarried, and she has a child. And the father of her child has never leaned across the kitchen table and punched her. It was just one slap, she said, of that night. But I could never have been sure there wouldn't be another. We live in a society that claims to embrace the belief that women must have the same rights as men, but claims don't always translate into reality. Many of us grow up in an environment where the words and actions of others make clear that women are in fact second-class citizens. But the failure to protect a woman, as we all know, is not just failure to protect a single person. It is failure to protect our children and therefore our very future. And we know this failure is not being addressed by enough people and with the requisite seriousness because its fallout is constant and public. Some of you may have heard of the domestic violence case concerning a famous South Indian actor and his wife that went public a couple of weeks ago. The actor, Darshan, was accused of assaulting his wife, Vijay Lakshmi, and threatening her and their 3-year-old son with a revolver inside their luxury car. The incident took place following an argument he had with his wife over his alleged relationship with an actress. Here's what happened next. The wife filed a police complaint against her husband, and as a result, his affair went public. The actress he was having an affair with was immediately given a 3-year ban from appearing in films by the Producers Association for breaking up the actor's family. It's been just a few days, and some of you may be able to guess what happened next. The actress's career is over. Although the ban was eventually revoked, it's uncertain that she will ever work again. The actor's wife withdrew all charges and is back with her husband. And the man who ruined one woman's career threatened another in front of their child. What do you think happened to him? He's back at work, and his next film would surely be a success. Now, despite where my stories are rooted, we know enough to agree that this isn't an Indian problem or a problem particular to the subcontinent. So the question we must ask ourselves is that if this brutality isn't a problem of place or people or economics, what is it about? And what must we as women and the men who support our goals do towards bringing an end to the violence? I'm going to tell you another story. I was on a flight from Abu Dhabi to Bombay, returning home after spending a few weeks in the Middle East, researching a piece about labor from India. I got to meet a lot of Indian workers, but they were all men. I wanted to meet women. Finally, an officer at the Indian embassy took me aside and told me I was on a fool's errand. There was no way I would be able to meet female domestic labor, he said. They were kept under virtual lock and key. Now, this is a situation South Asian women in the US who have suffered abuse may find themselves familiar with. Because they didn't speak the local language, there was no way for these women to protest. And there was no question of running away. Firstly, because they didn't know how to escape. Secondly, because they wouldn't know where to escape to. And thirdly, because even if they did escape, they would still be answerable to their family. So they were afraid, and as a result, they remained imprisoned. So I left empty-handed, and I was on the flight home when the woman beside me struck up a conversation. Her name was Padmavati Kadali. She was in her 30s, a mother of 2 children. Until that day, she had been working for a large family in Abu Dhabi. Kadali's hands were rough with scabs, and she had a huge black eye. Very soon, in a combination of English, Hindi, and that universal language of hand gestures, Kadali told me her story. Her hands were scabbed because she washed, cooked, and cleaned all day. And she had a black eye because she'd been pushed by her former employer's driver. But she had no other bruises, she pointed out proudly. Because the first time her employer tried to slap her, Kadali had grabbed her employer's hand and said to her in the little English that she knew, "Next time you beat, I call police." So here is this cleaning lady, in a country notorious for its mistreatment of domestic labor. And this woman, who do you think would be the first to get brutalized, was not, because she wouldn't permit it. Kadali was fired for insubordination, which, as you can guess, means that her employer didn't take her attitude towards being beaten very well. And when we met, she was on her way home because, as she put it, she'd rather be poor and safe than make money and be abused. Kadali taught me how to live a better life, and the lesson she taught me, as you may guess, is to simply say no, and when that doesn't work, to leave. But many women, of course, cannot leave. Because women still think about everyone else before we think of ourselves, women who are suffering abuse need to know that by protecting themselves, they are also protecting their children, their family, and their future. This assurance can make the difference between staying and leaving. To illustrate my point, I'd like to tell you a final story for the evening. It's the story of a courageous mother called Shabana. Shabana left Tamil Nadu for Virginia as a new wife. From the very onset, her husband beat her. Shabana says it took her a very long time to even understand what was being done to her. And when she did figure it out, she was scared. She tried talking to her family. She tried counseling. She waited out every day and spent every night trying to figure out how she could extricate herself and, more importantly, her son from this situation. She would say to herself, "It's my responsibility to give my son a better life." Shabana found out of Asha over the internet. Almost immediately, everything changed. She had someone to talk to, someone to draw strength from. And that strength gave her the courage, and it does require a great deal of courage, to leave home. In a recent letter to Asha, Shabana wrote, "I want you to know what a wonderful thing you did for me in my time of need. I couldn't have done it without you. Please keep helping other women like me. For because you helped me, I cry no more. I feel safe. And I feel finally like I'm leading a good life with my son." Let us listen to Shabana, and let us not just be moved by the pain that she endured or the courage she displayed, but act upon it. I'd now like to thank the President, the Board, and every single volunteer member of Asha for their sincerity, their perseverance, and the hope they have infused over 20 years in the lives of many, many women. And I have no doubt they will continue to do so. And I want to thank each one of you for being present here. By your presence, you have added your voice to the chorus of hope that believes no woman should suffer domestic violence. I thank you, and I know Nalini, Sunita, and Shabana would thank you too.